Hi, I'm Gianne Marasigan from PSC 11, and this is my oral essay for CPSEL 121, Philosophy of Law. So for the first question, why is philosophy important in the study of law? In the context of lawmaking, philosophy is used to understand the nature of man to acquire a notion of how men could be controlled and how authority could be instilled in society. Correspondingly, philosophy ensures that authority is not merely used to take advantage of men, but rather to use the knowledge of their nature to better uphold ethical principles, such as protecting their rights and providing them with equal and fair privileges. In the case of studying law, a philosophical perspective could be used to understand the justification of existing laws and the enforcement of such. Philosophy helps us understand if a law is valid, aka if it is ethical, fair, and balanced, and understand if a law is normative, aka if it is practical, useful, and if it upholds the interest and welfare of the nation and its people. So for the second question, can the rule of law exist in a non-democratic political society? First, let's understand the concepts. The rule of law is enforced to ensure that all persons and entities in any position or with any margin of power are subject to the same set of laws. Why? To protect society and its people from abuse and exploitation of power. To ensure that the interest of the people is always considered and their welfare is never compromised. That being said, this implies that the rule of law revolves around protecting the people. So considering that only democracy is the type of political society that primarily prioritizes the people, then this must therefore imply that only democracy would have a rule of law, or at the very least, a rule of law that will always be upheld and practiced. So for the third question, what does it mean for the government to be under the law? In simpler terms, it means that politicians who either enforce laws, create laws, and interpret laws are still obliged to follow the same set of rules, obligations, and limitations that everybody else in the country follows. The concept makes sure that the democratic government of the people remains for the people by balancing the sovereignty appointed upon the government. It guarantees and obliges the government to function while respecting proper ethical principles and innate human rights. So now for the fourth question. In what sense is rule of law a self-contradictory concept according to Hobbes? So Hobbes expresses the idea that the rule of law is self-contradictory because how could the sovereign entity with supposedly the highest power and authority be under a limitation? This would imply that another entity is enforcing this limitation, and this entity is therefore more powerful than the former. As such, the essence of who holds actual sovereignty becomes unclear. In another context, this implies that the government is not sovereign as it is under the law. As such, the government's stability and authority are compromised. However, it has been made clear by James Madison that the rule of law does not diminish the sovereignty of a government. The rule of law only regulates sovereignty to avoid exploitation through the process of checks and balances, which is still enforced by the same government, only in its different branch. Now for the last question, number 5. Can a genuine democratic society exist without the rule of law? My answer is definitely not. Democracy ensures that the power is on the hands of the people. The rule of law ensures that the power is shared by the people. So they go hand in hand. Democracy guarantees that the government of the people, by the people, remains for the people. Ang rule of law naman ang naninigurado na ang batas para sa tao ay mananatili namang makatao. So with this understanding, it is clear that it would not make sense at all to have a democracy without a rule of law. Because how could one guarantee that the interest of the people will always be considered? If politicians, for example, promise to serve the people, then it would be only natural for them to institute a specific set of rules for the creation, enforcement, and interpretation of the law, as a promise that their principles will be perpetually maintained. So, once again, I am Gianne Marasigan from PSC 11, and that was my oral essay for CPSCL 121, Philosophy of Law. Thank you.